I've heard working for a local newspaper is a good way to break into journalism. Is this true, and what's the future for regional newspapers?
Just very briefly, I can't speak for them now, but the other people here probably know the parlour state and the issues facing them and technology and the commercial side and things. But the one thing that I think about them, which is incredibly good, they used to call it I think they used to call it indentures, the thing that I did, where you went and you had this almost like Dickensian experience. It was grubby, sordid, underpaid, badly lit, crap technology. They beat the shit out of you. But actually, God, they beat some great lessons into you too. I mean, just some basic communication skills. I came out of a university like this, and I thought I was the bee's knees. I thought I knew how to write. I was cocky. I was certain that I was going to change the world. I had a fantastic editor who beat the living daylights out of me, not physically, but just mentally, until my spirit was within a wafer of being crushed. But he taught me how to write. He taught me how to understand the world. He helped me understand what life was like in small towns in England. And I benefited enormously from it. Had I not done it, I think I would have, I don't know what I'd have done. It was a brilliant, compressed, tough, but really rigorous experience. And if you can get your hands on the equivalent now, I would, because it sets you up for life.
I mean, I think local newspapers, I write for one in the northeast, and they're obviously going through a really, really bad time. But I was speaking to the editorial director of our group, and he was saying actually in one way, it's very painful having to let a lot of people go. In one way, it's a great opportunity for them because they are now exploring new media in a really, really, they have to now to survive. And they're putting so much effort into web-based journalism, which really is their way forward, local web-based journalism, that actually it's a great opportunity, particularly if you're young. I mean, the other side of entry point journalism, of course, is local radio. And I started in local radio. When I left here, I was a BBC News trainee, so I was a trainee journalist, which I don't know if they still do it, but it was the best course you could ever have. It's like, the day I joined, they said to us, there were 6 of us had been chosen out of only 1,000 entries. And I was the token red brick because I came from York. All the rest were from Oxbridge. And they said to me, we are hoping that one of you will become Director General. And, we guarantee you a job at the end. So it was such an elite, sort of ridiculous upset. They said, unless you don't pay your licence fee or bounce a cheque at BBC cashiers, you will be absolutely assured of a senior management job in the corporation and you'll be here to the end. And this is your BBC staff number and you'll have it until you retire. That was the attitude in those days. But the first thing I got sent to was Radio Derby. And I think I had the same news editor as you, because he beat the shit out of you. And I probably learnt more out of that wonderful 4-month attachment than I did about anything else. It's absolutely fantastic. By the way, one of the 6 of us almost did become Director General. He was called Tony Hall, but he was beaten by Greg.
Good job. David, welcome to David Parkin. Why don't you just tell us who you are first?
I have spent all my career in regional newspapers, but left about 14 months ago to launch a new regional internet website called thebusinessdesk.com, and basically we just deliver business news via the internet, via email to registered users, free every day. We've now got 13,000 registered users, expanded into the northwest. We've got an office in Manchester and recruited the business editor of the Manchester Evening News to join us. I was business editor of the Yorkshire Post before this. And essentially we just came up with a model of providing free business news to an audience of key business people within the region. And we make our money through advertising, sponsorship and events. That's gone really well so far. We raised enough money to develop a brand, to invest in that, and now we've had some fantastic advertisers. We did have some major banks some time ago, but not so much recently. But a great bunch of advertisers for a business audience. I can't say I saw it coming, but I think, in hindsight, I'm pleased that I did leave regional newspapers, because I don't think there's a regional newspaper in the country that hasn't already got rid of people or is considering that at the moment, and I think that's terribly sad. I think regional newspapers are a fantastic place to work. I'd say to start, yeah, but I wouldn't say to say, oh, I've got to get on the ladder, because I left a journalism course in Preston and started on my local paper, which was also in Derby, the Derby Evening Telegraph, and then moved around the country basically just to get pay rises because it was so badly paid. I got kicked around by my editor, and Peter's right, it's the best possible training ground. I think I quickly realised that this dream I had of working for the Times or the Telegraph or even the Sun was probably not something that I was cut out for. And I think also in hindsight, it wasn't exactly the great dream when you look at the way that the national newspapers have gone. And I realised I wasn't a great foot in the door reporter. An old editor of mine, Neil Fowler, pointed me in the direction of business journalism, and that for me was a great niche. It was you were able to develop relationships with people. In regional journalism, you actually build relationships which you continue to return to, and people trust you. And essentially that was the basis of us launching the businessdesk.com. We were trusted by our audience. And you know, I do think national newspapers do have that problem because they don't go constantly back to the same contacts. They're always cherry-picking stories from all over the country, and I think that's very difficult when they're under massive pressure to increase sales or even just try and stop sales falling, and so they're always pushing the boundaries. But I think that regional newspapers do have a future, I think a slightly different future. I'm not completely convinced that newspapers have really got their heads around the internet. You know, how many newspapers are making good revenues from the internet? None. Even the Daily Telegraph, which has invested millions into it, you know, I don't see massive revenues coming from that. That's a massive problem because at the same time they've had the rug pulled from under them. With the current downturn, they've lost huge revenues from their core platforms. I mean, regional newspapers, whether it's classified adverts, they've all gone online to eBay. You know, there's very little property advertising. Business advertising has fallen as well. Consumer advertising is dropping. Job adverts have all gone online. And I don't think the newspapers have, you know, one or two have created platforms in which to provide that service to their audience. But I don't think newspapers have really managed to move their audience, their print audience, online in a big enough fashion. And I think that must be a massive concern for them. But I see a future for regional newspapers because you probably can't get that kind of depth of local knowledge and information anywhere else. I can see a point where you know you get very, very local websites. I know the BBC has been at the centre of quite a lot of controversy over that, but I see people wanting to know what's going on, you know, at the end of their street, and I think that's where newspapers still have that niche. I think, unfortunately, buying a newspaper is, you know, I'd be interested how many people buy a newspaper. How many people here buy a newspaper every day? Hardly any. You know, local, national, you know, that's any newspaper. That's frightening. You're going online, but what revenue are they making from you online? You know, that's the issue they've got. The issue is, you know, where are you guys going to get your news in future, and how are they going to make money out of that? So can they make enough money through selling adverts around the news that you're reading on the internet? And, you know, I think that's the problem, because at the same time they've got the massive costs of printing and delivering and producing a newspaper, and that's hugely costly. So I think it's a massive issue which they're wrestling with. But I see newspapers moving towards delivering the news to you on a daily basis, on a minute-by-minute basis online, and then having a reflective view in the paper. You can, you know, the Sunday and Saturday newspapers are doing better because you've got more time to read them, and you probably want to know what their take on a particular news issue is. So I can see that growing, and then, you know, the less time is spent finding out what the news is from newspapers, but more time is spent finding out what their view of the news is.
I started in local newspapers when I was 19. It was a great life. I mean, it was just a wonderful thing to do, a lot of fun. I went recently, I got to know the woman who owns the Kent Messenger Group, so I went down to look, and they're quite interesting, because they now run newspapers, they have their own websites, they bought all the local radio stations, and they're very keen to get into local television. And I think if you can if they can manage that and survive the downturn, but if they can manage that, then you can see a future for being a journalist. Now, if you go and do that, That's a great job because you learn about radio, you learn about broadcasting, newspapers, online and television all at the same time. And in future, there'll be the one journalist who'll go and cover them all because no one can afford it otherwise. But it's a great job. So if you get that chance to go to one of those groups that are doing that, it'll be a tremendous place to learn. Just really good fun.
Trinity Mirror are doing the same.
Yeah, there's no other way. Whether they survive, I mean, a lot won't survive what's happening at the moment.